So most people know the importance of having a budget. They are useful whether you make $30,000 a year or $100,000 a year because they can really keep your spending on track. But even if you have a budget, there is always room for improvement. So today we're going to look at several things that you can do to make your budget better. I would also like to thank Water and Chocolate for partnering with me on this video. We'll speak more about them in a moment. However, this shop includes a wide selection of budget planners and digital planners which can really help plan your spending. The first tip is to write out your budget. Now, there are several ways to create a budget. Some people might prefer to use apps, whereas others will use spreadsheets. Now, both methods can work, and with the use of technology, you might even feel that writing out your budget by hand is a bit old school. However, for some people, writing it out might be the better approach. I recently stumbled across some information that said that writing is good for the brain, and apparently people are 40% more likely to stick with something when they write it down. There's something about the act of putting pen to paper that activates the visual areas of your brain. So if you write out your budget, it's more likely to stay on your mind. Now, this isn't to say that you shouldn't use apps or spreadsheets. If those methods work for you, by all means continue. But if they haven't been working, it might be worth experimenting with writing out your budget because that could make all the difference in the world. And I also read it's helpful to make your budget pretty or nice. So instead of using a plain notebook, one thing you can do is get a budget planner because that can actually get you excited about budgeting. What I like about the 12-month budget planners offered by Water and Chocolate is that they include a variety of tools to really help you take control of your money. Not only do they feature a 12-month bill and income tracker, but also an annual payment tracker, a debt organizer, a debt payment tracker, and a savings tracker. Essentially, everything you need for your finances, plus you can choose from a variety of designs, and I will include a link below so you can go and check out their selection. Another way to make your budget better is to be realistic. Now, I am a big fan of the 50-30-20 budget. I've spoken about this in the past on previous videos, and the reason why I love this budget is because if you can keep your spending within these percentages, you will almost always have money left over for savings and debt repayment. But even though this is a great budget for making headway, before any budget can work, it really has to be realistic to your circumstances. And just to recap, with this budgeting plan, you agreed to spend no more than 50% of your after-tax income on needs, 30% on wants, and then 20% on savings and debt repayment. But one thing to keep in mind about this budgeting model is that the percentages are not hard or fast rules. Even though the percentages might work for some people, they will not work for everyone. So you have to go in and tweak the numbers based on where you are today. Because after you track your spending, you might realize that you're spending about 70% of your income on needs. And if that is the case, you cannot snap your fingers and overnight reduce your spending in your needs category by 20%. Now, that can be a long-term goal or something that you work toward, but in the moment, you need to find a variation that makes sense for your situation. And just to give you an example, if you're spending 70% of your income on needs, a more realistic variation for you might be to spend 25% on wants and then reserve 5% for savings and debt repayment. Or you can allocate 15% for wants and 15% for savings and debt. The bottom line is that if your budget is not realistic from the beginning, you're pretty much starting off on the wrong foot. Another tip is to give your budget enough time to work. The reality is you might have to play around with the figures and the percentages over several weeks in order to solidify your budget. And I don't want to be negative. However, mentally prepare for the possibility of your budget failing. And the only reason why I say this is because if you are new to budgeting, you will likely make a few rookie mistakes. You might underestimate your expenses, you might forget to include something in your budget, or you might give into spending temptation. So much can happen. This doesn't mean that budgets don't work or that they're not useful. However, you might have to go back to the drawing board, retrack your spending, and make some adjustments. Another tip is to use cash envelopes in areas where you normally overspend. For some people, this can be food. For others, it might be entertainment. Regardless of the category, if it's one where you tend to spend more money, definitely use cash envelopes in order to stay on track. This is a timeless method that a lot of people still use, and I know from experience that it can work. And just to give you an example, if you normally overspend on food and you want to spend no more than $100 a week, what you would do is get an envelope, you will mark that envelope food, and then you will put $100 inside. Now, when you go to the store, the only method of slip payment that you will bring with you will be the envelope with the $100, and once the money is gone, it's gone. And the reason why this works is because it forces you to be aware of your purchases while you're shopping, because if you get to the register and your total comes up to $110, yet you only have $100 in your pocket, there's now the whole process of having to put stuff back, take stuff off your total, which, let's be honest, nobody wants to go through that. Another tip is to involve the whole family. Now, if you have a partner, you will probably work with this person with regard to budgeting. But another thing you can also do is involve the kids. Now, of course, the age of your kids will determine how much you choose to involve them. But the reason why this tip can make budgeting better is because when everybody in the household understands spending limits, it becomes a lot easier to keep family spending on track. And this is beneficial because it can help kids learn about budgeting and money at a young age, and it can also help them learn the difference between needs and wants. And the way you involve the kids does not have to be anything super elaborate. It can be as simple as having them help when it comes to coupon clipping, or teaching them how to comparison shop in order to keep spending within a limit. Or if you have a monthly budget for family entertainment, another thing you might do is involve the kids when you're brainstorming practical ways to spend this money. It's also important to look at your year in advance. One mistake that some people make when it comes to budgeting is forgetting to account for those one-time yearly expenses, and those can include gifts, personal property taxes, or maybe annual renewals. If you don't have a lot of disposable cash, these expenses could potentially throw off your budget for the month. Now, technically, yes, you could go into your emergency fund. However, I do caution about making a habit of going into your emergency fund for non-emergency expenses, because when a true emergency does happen, you may not have enough money to deal with these issues. I recommend creating a list of all of your one-time annual expenses and then estimating how much you're likely to spend on each one. Let's say you estimate $1,000 in one-time annual expenses. One approach that might work is to save a little each month for these expenses. So if you have $1,000 in annual expenses, what you can do is set aside about $83 or $20 a week in a sinking funds account. This way, when it's time to pay those expenses, you don't have to use bill money and you don't have to dip into your emergency fund. And since your budget involves fixed expenses and variable expenses, which are those that can change from week to week, it is also important to review your budget on a weekly basis. And I know for some people that might seem like a bit much. However, variable expenses, they can be a budget killer because they're often harder to budget for. And these expenses can include food, gas, miscellaneous shopping, entertainment. And because these can change from week to week, if you don't track your spending on a regular basis, there's no way to really know if you're staying on track. And sometimes you won't even realize that you've gotten off track until you've already run out of money. So at the end of every week, go back and calculate how much you've spent in each variable category. And if the amount you spent is more than you budgeted for, you'll need to spend less in this category the following week. So there you have it. Those are my tips on ways to make your budget better, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, do consider subscribing. Here we talk a lot about personal finance and different ways that you can fix your wallet. So if you like videos like this, I do post every weekend and sometimes during the week. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in a few days.